Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This week we are doing Unit 6, which is one of the harder units. If you remember, it's post-Napoleonic times. It was, all the revolutions, the isms, Industrial Revolution, you name it. Anyway, it is one of the harder units, Unit 6, and then next unit, Unit 7, were the harder units that you guys said this year. So please make sure you review it. I have a funny feeling that the DBQ is going to be on Unit 6. I don't know why. God, my hair looks horrible. And I got to get the new background. I got to go back to the fish. You guys like the fish. Fish. Anyway, I haven't done that in a while. Sorry. Focus. In this video, I'm doing a cursory of the unit, but you need to make sure you do read about the unit. Yeah, I don't know. I just have this funny feeling that the DBQ is going to be on this unit. We'll see. I could be wrong. Anyway, don't forget to get your cast done. Other than that, I have nothing else. You guys are doing awesome with your assignments. You're keeping up. Some of you I worry about. I haven't heard from you or seen you guys, or you guys haven't contacted me, which kind of worries me. But anyway, please, if you're struggling, if you have issues, questions, feel free to contact me. Also, Wednesday during Zoom, you can always ask questions. You guys don't want to ask questions, and I'm like sad. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye. So, the Industrial Revolution pretty much starts in 1750 in the UK. It does start later on in the rest of Europe because of the Napoleonic Wars after the turn of the century. But the Industrial Revolution really does modernize all aspects of life for all social classes, really in the 18th century and then of course going into the 19th century. It does improve the standard of livings. We're talking about having more products, more leisure activity, you name it, and that continues to grow in the 19th century. It will also have a dramatic effect on the role of women and what they can do and what they cannot do outside the house, as well as childhood experiences. Now, of course, the Industrial Revolution is going to be extremely important. And the epicenter of the Industrial Revolution is going to be England, okay? Because really at this point in history, late 18th century, early 19th century, England is producing about half the world's cotton, about, 2/3 of the world's coal, about half the world's iron, and it controls about 1/3 of all trade that goes on in the entire world. So the UK is extremely important. Now, with that said, let's talk about some of the effects of the Industrial Revolution. Of course, we're talking about the Industrial Revolution having an effect on the middle class. The middle class are the ones that own the factories. So you're going to have an upper middle class that is going to be extremely wealthy. Now, they are not similar to the aristocrats. They are not equal to the aristocrats, even though a lot of the upper middle class might be even richer than the aristocrats. Okay, but you do have that social hierarchy. Aristocrats, people with titles and lots of land, they have, that title ensures that they are the top of the social class system. So it's going to be, the Industrial Revolution is going to create large amounts of factory owners that are wealthy, shippers and merchants and bankers all making large amounts of money. Now, that's the upper middle class. The lower middle class, you could say, would be your petite bourgeoisie. These are the people that basically have some kind of job that requires training, artisans, for example. Okay, and they make a good amount of money as well, but they're, let's just say that they live a more comfortable lifestyle. Okay, they are very middle class. They're, but they are nowhere near the wealth of the factory owners or the aristocracy by any means. And then, of course, the lower class, or the proletariat, as they're called. Okay, they have a low standard of living. They work hourly. They get paid very little. They do most of the work in society. Okay. Now, obviously, there's going to be changes as new inventions, new equipment for production is created. As we start moving away from everything being done by hand, through everything now being like starting to be done by machines, you're not going to need as many people to work the factories. And of course, some people are going to be upset by that, and they're called the Luddites. The Luddites they think that machines are going to control the world one day, and that they're going to take over the need for human beings. So they start, in the middle of the night, breaking into factories, attacking, the machines, destroying the machines, etc. There are some changes though, to try to appease the working class. Um, the 1799 Combination Acts will be repealed in 1824. If you remember, in 1799, the Combination Acts in Britain are created that outlaws unions. Okay, the union of workers, or groups of basically people, workers cannot gather together to talk about working conditions or pay or anything like that. Well, the Combination Acts will be repealed in 1824 to try to appease the union movement and the workers. Okay, really, of course, with Industrial Revolution, people are moving to the city, creating an urbanization problem. As you can see here, the urbanization problem is going to be severe. Of course, we're talking about in the larger cities of Liverpool and Manchester and London and Amsterdam and you name it. Okay, urbanization is going to be a big problem because now as people are going to the cities for work because they hear all this about the factories opening and there's a need of workers, and wherever they're living within the country, they may not have a good job there, or they may not have any job, so they decide to go to the cities. Okay, but unfortunately, the cities do not have any kind of plan for all these people that are moving quickly to the cities. We're talking about thousands of people, even daily, moving to these major industrial cities. So the housing and sanitation and such is really non-existent during this time period. And living in these cities were wretched, crime-ridden, horrible, dirty, any adjective you could think of. Okay, there's no such thing as sewers, no such thing as sanitation. You had diseases that were rampant because people didn't know any better, and of course that shortens the life of the people living there. Then also, when you think of the factories, safety wasn't important either. So between the unsafe factories and the unsafe living conditions, this is the reason why the city life, the people that lived in the city, where the lives were so short. Okay, because really they had very little of a chance. Now, countries like England will create things like poor laws to basically encourage people to find work. These poor laws were ways to punish or beat people if they were looking for help. So basically, if you were homeless, you didn't have a job, you didn't have food to put on the table, money to pay for food, you'd go to a poorhouse, like a shelter, that would give you food. Okay, but in return, before you get food or shelter, they're going to whip you. The idea is that this negative reinforcement is going to encourage you to finally get to work. Well, those of you in psychology know it doesn't necessarily work. But anyway, just the bad living conditions and everything will have drastic effects on the population, of the poor population. If you weren't poor, you didn't live in these cities. If you were middle class or upper class, for the most part, you would not live in these cities if you had an opportunity to. Of course, governments are going to start seeing the need to start regulating city life and also working life for the poor population. So in 1819, 1832, and other years, England is going to start passing laws called Factory Acts. These Factory Acts are basically where they're going to restrict ages that you could work and the number of hours you could work. You can't hire under the age of 9, for example, in the 1833 Act. And basically, most people, you can work 8 hours a day from ages like, 13 and up or more, as you get older. Mine Acts and you name it are all gonna be created during this time to try to alleviate the poor, wretched living conditions and such of the working class in these factory cities. Besides, of course, the living conditions of the poor, people are going to start looking at other ways to improve life in England. England is a very rich country and diverse country, but the wealth isn't shared through all populations. And it's also not the most democratic country in the world. Not everyone can vote. Most people could not vote. Most men, of course, we're talking about, could not vote in England. So that's going to start changing in the Great Reform Bill, or the Reform Bill of 1832. And in this Reform Bill, they're going to now make about 1 out of every 5 eligible people, men, of course, we're talking about, can now vote. Generally, this does not include the poor. This does not include women. Basically, you still had to own land in this Reform Bill. You had to have a large amount of land. So pretty much you're only talking about the upper middle class and above generally would be able to get the right to vote. Okay, but it does redistribute representation in the English Parliament. Now, even though this does not necessarily give large amounts of voting rights to a lot of people, it does start the ball moving. Because soon after this, you have the repeal of the Corn Laws, which is going to help alleviate the Irish potato famine, which, remember, the Corn Laws basically said that you had to buy corn, grain, wheat, and such from British resources or sources only. You could not buy foreign grains or wheat or corn. Okay, and that's going to help to alleviate the Irish potato famine. So now people can buy any corn, any wheat, anything. Okay, not just British corn and wheat. Okay, then also with the Reform Bill of 1832, we have the Chartist movement. The Chartist movement, also called the People's Charter, basically took the idea of the Reform Bill of 1832 and said, every male should have the right to vote. Every male should have a secret ballot. Every male should have these rights when it comes to voting. So every vote should count and every vote should be equal. Okay, the Chartist movement is very popular, but it really does not get a hold on in Parliament. Parliament refuses to really address it, and beyond the working class, it is not as popular because some of the Chartist movement leaders are using tactics that kind of scare people and aggravate people. So even though it does fail in the 1830s, really from the 1830s onward to the turn of the century, different aspects of the Chartist movement will actually come to fruition, and they'll actually get their secret ballots, their evening of Parliament representation, and actually universal suffrage, not just male suffrage, but universal suffrage. Okay, now granted, suffrage for women will come a little bit later, but by the turn of the century, almost all males are going to be able to vote in England. Now, the Great Reform Bill of 1867, really, by this point, England was the workshop of the world. It built pretty much almost everything. It was the mastermind through much new technology, great ships, iron ships, banks, you name it. Okay. Well, by 1867, though, as more people are getting wealthier, they create a provision called the Reform Bill of 1867 that extends the suffrage to pretty much almost all males. You didn't have to own land as long as you paid a rent of a certain amount. But again, though, women were not included. So we have looked at social changes, political changes after the French Revolution in Europe, mainly, of course, in England. But now we're going to look at art changes, and this affects all of Europe. It's called Romanticism. This is a direct opposite of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was all about using logic to come up with ideas and such. With logic came the neoclassical period of art. Now, in the turn of the century, 1800 to 1850, you have what's called the Romantic period, where it's all about trusting your heart, not your head. Go with your emotions. Okay. This was created by the work of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was an avid believer of feelings and not about logic. Okay, and this artwork is all about bringing emotion to the forefront. As you could see on this slide and the next slide, you see some aspects of Romanticism that is very emotional. Okay, you have Delacroix, you have Turner, you have Goya, all these artists of the Romantic period. Okay, a lot of them have like classical scenes, but depicting modern um, problems. For example, during the Romantic period, it's all about fighting for what you believe in. Even though most likely you're going to die, fight for what you believe in. Go with your heart. Don't go with your head. So, with Romanticism, you're going to have many movements that occur partly because of Romanticism. This idea of fighting for what you believe in is going to be key. Okay. Um, well, some of these isms that we're going to look at, they were caused by Romanticism. They were also caused indirectly by Napoleon Bonaparte. For example, nationalism. Under Napoleon, as he was taking over all of Europe, he forced everyone to practice the French culture, and people started becoming very nationalistic. And they started saying, "Hey, we like our culture. We appreciate the French culture, but we like our culture." And but even though Napoleon tried to squash um, the, these other cultures, okay, and try to impose a unified French culture in everyone, it really brings up the nature of nationalism, where people are come together because they have something that's similar, like their nationality. Excuse me, not nationality. Such as their language, their religion, their geographical area, you name it. Nationalism is this idea of people that have stuff that's in common, whether it's language, history, traditions, all wanting to become their own country. You're going to see that in the Italian peninsula. You're going to see that in the Germanic states. You're going to see that in the Austrian Empire. Okay. And really, it becomes very popular, unbeknownst to him, but Napoleon's going to cause it. Other isms that you need to know for this unit is conservatism. This is basically the traditional form of society where the way it's been done for hundreds of years, where you have three classes, the upper class having all the power, they're the ruling elite. They The conservatives believed in stability, and change and progress isn't really necessary. Um, and conservatives thought that you measure success through your material things. Okay, so the more stuff you have, the more land you have, the better you are. They didn't really believe in natural rights. They didn't believe that everyone had to have rights as long as the certain people had the rights. And then, of course, you have liberalism. Liberalism was a movement, really comes out of the Napoleonic Code and also the Enlightenment, where it basically they looked at countries like Great Britain and even America, where they liked the representative form of government. They didn't mind having a constitutional monarchy. That's fine, but as long as the people had a say in government, they were not for democracy. No one during this time period is for democracy. Liberalists are your middle class people. They're making large amounts of money, but they have no rights. So they wanted to have a say in government. They wanted to have rights for the middle class. Okay, they were the bourgeoisie, not the urban poor, not the lower classes. They were the bourgeoisie. Okay, they believed that everyone should have natural rights, and that the bourgeoisie and above should have voting rights and a say in government. So the conservatism is going to be upper class, liberalism is going to be middle class, nationalism is all classes. Now, as the Industrial Revolution is occurring, you're going to have republicanism, also called socialism, starting to come to fruition. And republicanism or socialism is this idea that is about giving people, the working class, better opportunity for money, um, redistribution of the wealth, better working conditions, etc. This is not a new concept. This is actually a concept that comes from the Bible. Socialism comes from the Bible, where they talk about Jesus helping his brother, helping the poor. That's what socialism is all about, basically. Spreading of the wealth. Those that are wealthy should help those that are not wealthy. And of course, republicanism and socialism will create many different types of socialism, like utopian socialism, where you have this community where everyone is equal. Saint Simeonism, Fourierism, Owenism, Blanchism, all types of utopian socialisms. I'm not going to go over each one. You could do that on your own as you're studying. Christian socialism is really a direct focus from the Bible, using Bible's teachings to say, hey, socialism is good because it's in the Bible. The most radical of the socialisms, of course, is Marxism, which calls for a revolution. It's the only socialism or republicanism that actually calls for a revolution. All the others are talking about gradual change. Okay. To delve into the isms a little bit more, on this slide and the next one, you could see liberalism and conservatism basically differentiated. Okay, liberalism in the 1800s is basically all about rights, natural rights, life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness, you name it. It is giving more rights to more people. Of course, liberals during the 19th century is more focused on the middle class, but generally just it's all about free marketing. It's all about being secular. It's all about individual growth in the middle class. Of course, this is all based on the Enlightenment and the French Revolution. 19th century conservatism, on the other hand, is really just the status quo, where you have the upper class having most of the power, because the upper class and the monarchy or the established government, they keep society intact. They bring calmness. It's not majority rule. It's religious. It's monarchist. It's the peasants have a job in life, and that's to serve the upper classes, etc. You'll see that on this slide and also the next. So of course, conservatism is the major philosophy pre-French Revolution, and it's going to be the major philosophy post-Napoleon. Now, after Napoleon falls, the five biggest countries, Austria, Prussia, Russia, England, and France, will come together in what's called the Concert of Europe, which is it's a group of countries that will try to maintain a balance of power and peace in Europe post-Napoleon. It's going to be led by a guy by the name of Metternich. And this idea is to basically put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Europe is in pieces, and now it's Metternich and the Concert of Europe's job to try to put Europe back together again. And their goal is to restore legitimate states, put all the monarchies back in power with the exception of the HRE, weaken France so that the French Revolution can never happen again, reduce France's borders, make them pay for the revolution, and they had to pay about 700 million francs, which is a large amount of money, but does not cripple them because the concert of Europe was afraid of if you punish them too severely, you're just going to have another revolution down the road. Okay, and pretty much for the most part, all the different provisions of the Concert of Europe are going to be met, and for the most part, most people are fine with it. Even France, they understand that the French Revolution was bad. Napoleon, some of his actions weren't the best. So it does weaken France to a bit, but it does not stop revolutions because France will have a series of other revolutions coming up. But it did create a balance of power in Europe, and it avoided all major wars all the way to World War I. There was a balance of power in Europe that lasted until the formation of Germany in 1871. Now, Metternich and the Concert of Europe will meet from 1815 to 1848. In these periodic meetings called congresses, they really talk about collective security. Whenever you have a rebellion or a protest in one country, it is going to be put down by all the countries within the Concert of Europe. This is very important. As you see here, these are some of the provisions of the Congress of Vienna, which is one of the meetings of the Concert of Europe, where it was to restore the balance of power, contain France, bring legitimacy, all these major ideals. Now, it's going to also reshape the borders of Europe. And in the next slide, you'll see the 1815 map of Europe and how it changed from pre-revolutionary France. The Concert of Europe is going to be very beneficial. Besides, of course, having a balance of power, restoring the powers of Europe, it is also going to put down a lot of revolts. From 1815 to 1848, there's going to be many revolts, something about 30 or so different revolts throughout Europe and Latin America. Most of these revolts are liberalistic. There were some that were nationalistic based. People are wanting more rights. They want more say in the government. And there were some that were more nationalistic, and these mainly occurred in the Austrian Empire. They wanted to become, groups of people wanted to become their own countries. Okay, like the Hungarians, the Czechs, the Italians, etc. Now, most of these revolts are going to fail, okay, because again, you have the people of a certain area going against a well-armed military, and usually the military is going to win. In some of the revolts, I'm not going to go over every single one of them, but in the early revolts, the Concert of Europe really worked well together, pre-1848. Now, in Spain and Italy, people are wanting more rights. They want a constitutional monarchy. France intervenes on the behalf of the Concert of Europe, and they're squashed. Austria also intervenes, and other countries as well. In the Germanic states, the Burschenschaften, which was a student group, okay, they are going to want to, it's actually a combination of liberalistic and nationalistic. The Burschenschaften wants a united Germany, but they also wanted liberal reforms. They wanted rights. This student group on a college campus is going to really become very popular. And when Metternich finds out about this, the Concert of Europe is going to squash the Burschenschaften, okay? And Metternich will issue the Karlsbad Decree, which basically censored students on college campuses, university campuses. It basically said that you cannot have meetings of more than a few people, social distancing. You can, you don't have freedom of speech, freedom of press. Based on what you say, if you're causing trouble, you could be arrested. Newspapers, books were confiscated by the secret police that were set up to monitor universities, because honestly, even to this day, areas of change are always around universities. Younger people want change. Okay, so Metternich is trying to squash the movement for change by putting censorship on the college campuses. In Russia, you have the Decembrist revolt. Okay, large groups of people, including some of the military, did not want Nicholas to be the next czar. Nicholas was very conservative, but his brother Constantine, younger brother Constantine, was more liberal and was more open-minded and popular. And they wanted Constantine to be the next czar to really bring more rights to the people of Russia. Well, the line of succession did not allow this. Nicholas was going to be next in line to the throne. And when he becomes the czar, he's going to suppress the Decembrists brutally. Okay, and for the most part, he basically says no one can go against the Russian czar. Okay, and he's going to really have this rule of authoritarian, where basically he says what goes. He's going to try to force the Russification of the Russian Empire, meaning anybody within the Russian Empire should practice the Russian culture. To remember, the Russian Empire consists of many different areas, not just Russia. And he's going to try to instill the Russian Orthodox Church into everyone. Now, there's several other revolts in Europe, in Belgium, Greece, Italy, South America. But there's one area that there's no revolts in, and that's England. England will be free of all revolts. Okay, that's mainly because of the type of government that they have. There's more freedom in England than in most other areas of Europe. Now, Belgium and Greece are successful with their revolts. They are both nationalistic revolts. Belgium will become its own country, seceding from the Netherlands, and Greece will become its own country, seceding from the Ottoman Empire. South America, for the most part, slowly from early 1800s all the way to 1898, will slowly gain their independence from the European powers of Spain, Portugal, Britain, and France. Italy, though, still under control of France and Spain and the Austrian Empire. Previously, we looked at a lot of the revolutions in Europe, but one country was particularly absent, and that was France. Now, the reason I left that out was because there's a lot of things happening in France. If you remember, Unit 6 mantra was, when France sneezes, the rest of Europe gets sick. Well, when the original French Revolution occurs, that's going to eventually cause revolutions early on in the 1815, 1820s. Then there's going to be another French Revolution in 1830 that causes revolutions between 1830 and 1848. And then France will have another revolution in 1848, which will cause a plethora of revolutions in the year 1848. And finally, the last French Revolution, 1871, that will cause that will help to cause the Russian Revolution later on. So when France sneezes, the rest of Europe gets sick. So let's talk about France a little bit. In 1824, Louis XVIII is going to die. Louis XVIII comes to the throne after Napoleon. He is somewhat of a politique. He's trying not to rattle the boat too much or shake the boat too much. He doesn't want to get anybody too angry. But, the problem is, though, is he doesn't reign for too long. In 1824, he does die. His brother comes to the throne. You would have thought that if you saw your father and mother die from their mistakes, and you saw the greatness of your brother, okay, you would have learned something from that. This is just similar to the Stuarts in England. Okay, Charles X opposed liberalism, opposed republicanism, opposed constitutionalism. Okay, he angered the working class. He angered the bourgeoisie by taking away rights. Okay, under Louis XVIII, the bourgeoisie were given rights to vote. And under the July ordinances, Charles X took them away. Okay, and people got angry, and the bourgeoisie went to the streets, went to the barricades, and revolted. Okay, this is what the Les Mis Revolution was all about. Okay, people went to the streets, revolted, and the bourgeoisie won. Charles X is ousted as king, and come to the throne is Louis Philippe. He's also called the Citizen King. Louis Philippe supported the middle class. He supported business interests. Okay, the bourgeoisies. He was politically liberal, politically social. Okay, but he was conservative as well. Okay, so he's a little bit of a mixture of everything. But here's the thing: he focused a lot of his reign from of his reign from 1830 to 1848 on the middle class, not really dealing with the problems of the lower classes. And that's what's going to do him in, because in 1848 the lower classes had enough, and they start revolting. Okay, and in 1848 you have the radicals, and you have You have the radicals starting to cause some trouble, even some liberals causing trouble. Okay, you start having price of food going up because of bad crops. There's too much spending going on, so they keep rising taxes. The living conditions in the cities were poor, and he wasn't addressing the plight of the poor, whether it's working conditions or living conditions. So enough was enough, and you're going to have the revolution of 1848, and this creates a plethora of other revolutions throughout Europe. But in France, it was particularly of the lower classes, whereas in the rest of Europe, it could be of all classes. They just took their lead from France. So the 1848 French Revolution occurs mainly because Louis Philippe refuses to acknowledge the problems of the working class. We're talking about working conditions, we're talking about social conditions, and also political conditions. Besides, of course, the bad working living conditions, the poor wanted the right to vote. At this point, only the middle class and upper classes can vote. Well, when Louis Philippe heard about this, well, he gives the response kind of like similar to Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette did when he heard that they wanted the right to vote. He says, "Well, once they're rich, they could vote. Until then, they cannot vote." That is insensitive. When you have an angry group of people, you don't just say something like that, even though you might be thinking that. Well, eventually the people take to the streets, and the government of Louis Philippe is going to collapse. The bourgeoisie king is going to fall, and he becomes, in history, the last king of France. So, now the Second French Republic is going to be formed, okay? And there's going to be an election for all positions of government, including the presidency. Now, there's over 30 people running for presidency. Many different groups of people are going to vie for this. Liberals, conservatives, nobles, middle class, working class, socialists, you name it, lots of different groups. But one person in particular is going to come to the top. Okay, one person in particular is going to get the most votes overwhelmingly. And that person wasn't because of his ideas, wasn't because he was popular, because no one really knew him, but they noticed a name, his name, that really got everyone's attention. He had the last name of Bonaparte. This last name, Bonaparte, reminded people of when France was great. Okay, when France was the strongest country in Europe. This person was Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte. So they voted for him because they wanted to make France great again. Now, he's popular. He wins overwhelmingly. And the first part of his reign from 1848 to 1852, he's the president. Okay, he's very popular because he reestablishes France. He gets people working again. He fixes everything that needed to be fixed. And within 4 years, just like his uncle, he has a vote on whether they should eliminate the republic and bring an empire back. And they do. And he crowns him, and overwhelmingly in a plebiscite vote, he becomes Emperor Napoleon III. Okay. Now, during his reign, he is going to modernize industry. He's going to help the workers. He's going to rebuild Paris into what we know of it today. Okay, he's going to eliminate the horrible living conditions. He's going to create the first sewer system. He's going to create public housing. He's going to create a lot of infrastructure. Okay, so domestically, he was great. Okay, next unit, we're going to talk more about his failures, which would be on the international side. Well, the 1848 revolution does restore order in France with the election of Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. But it also causes revolutions throughout the rest of the year in the rest of Europe, in every country, of course, with the exception of England. Okay, the young Italians are trying to unify under Mazzini to get rid of the Austrian Empire. You have the Czechs and the Hungarians also in the Austrian Empire wanting a nationalistic revolt or having a nationalistic revolt. They also failed. In Germany, the Germanic states create the Zollverein, the Zollverein, okay, which is this group of Germanic states that basically eliminate internal tariffs so that they could trade with each other. Okay, it does not include Austria. Austria is not included in the Zollverein. Okay, besides, of course, wanting economic freedom within the Germanic states, the Zollverein and the countries within the Zollverein are going to start wanting a constitution and wanting to unify. Frederick William IV is not going to want this of Prussia. He's of Prussia. Okay, he doesn't want this, and eventually he's going to dissolve the Frankfurt Assembly, which created the Zollverein. The Zollverein will still stay around, but this idea of unifying them politically will be put away for now until the 1860s, 1870s, when Germany starts unifying. Okay, so in Austria, there's lots of revolts, but they all just basically fail. Now, what are some of the consequences? Okay, why did a lot of these revolts, especially in Austria, fail in 1848? It's because there was a lack of unity of the people. If the Hungarians, if the Czechs, the Italians all came together to go against the Austrians with the Russian help, they would have won. But all these individual areas of the Austrian Empire could not go against Austria and Russia. Okay, there was always peace in the UK that stays there, but liberalism and nationalism is going to grow for the rest of the 1800s. And for nationalism, that'll help lead to the unification of Italy and Germany. For liberalism, you're going to start seeing more people getting the right to vote, more people getting rights, and really by World War I, women are going to start, or after World War I, women are going to start getting the right to vote. Okay. One thing this also happens in 1848, this idea of romanticism, go with your heart, not with your head, dies. In its place is realism. Okay, life sucks and then you die, excuse my language. And of course, the realist movement of literature and art also occurs in the second half of the 1800s. Any questions? Well, if you do, make sure you attend the Zoom session and ask them. Okay, because this is unit 6 and 7 are difficult units, so you need to make sure that you understand this. So with that said, this is the 1848 French Revolution. This is unit 6. Bye-bye.